No. Welcome to another episode of Chism Live. Chism Live. We are excited to welcome you to this particular show because it's a very important one. African cosmology of creation. What is it? What is it? Everybody has their own. What is ours? Today, joining me, as usual, is Dibia Ochwaja Yudi Onyoha, who is a historian, as you all know. And so he's going to really open this topic up and really share what he knows with us. You did they will.
I'm good.
Yeah, this is a very important topic because it seems like we're so good at telling other people's stories. We're so good at having other people dictate to us how life came to be, but we have our own. And so when we talk about African cosmology, what are we talking about, Yudi?
Well, we're talking about creation, right? We're talking about the first principle. How did this all come together? What happened? What kind of magic is responsible for the life that we now experience on Earth? The funny thing about that question is it's about storytelling. It's about the survival of communities, of humanity, in whatever geographical location that you may be in. What do I mean by that? I'm talking about transmission of information from one generation to another is why we continue to exist as human beings, right? Without lack of this receiving and transmission of information, then the next generation is really, devoid of the materials and the intelligence and the information that it needs to continue. Cosmology deals with that relationship between humans and the creator. Every culture tells stories that make them feel good about themselves. All cultures tell stories that make them feel good about themselves, but we tell somebody else's story. And we haven't gotten to the point of intelligence where we have to tell our own story, because telling your own story is very, very important. It is part of your survival strategy to be able to put your information out there transmitted from one generation to another so that the next generation, the generations that come after you, have a sense of self. They have a footprint into the past, to the present, and into the future. Uh, you will agree with me that a tree without deep roots soon topples over. And if you build a castle on sand, your castle is going to fall. So it's very important that we are anchored in our history, in our cosmology, and understand that all human systems are product of religion. And cosmology and cosmogony are all products of religion because it is an attempt to explain how we all got here. And of course, the stories vary from one culture to another. We have our story of how humans were created. Different African communities have their own, different stories. Different cultures have different stories. There are some cultures that don't even believe that creation was a process. For example, Shintoism believes that creation came out of chaos. And it is out of that chaos that all the gods, and I put an S there, came into being. And then they were able to now, write their own cosmology to explain how they got here. Now, the thing about it is to preserve the Japanese culture and history, it was necessary for them to ferment their own story because at that time, Confucianism and Buddhism had been established from China to Japan. So it was a way of cultural protection for them to come up with their own to keep themselves from being absorbed into spiritual philosophies that doesn't have anything to do with being Japanese. Religion is the first human principle. It is through religion that all human systems came into being. Your economic systems, your cultural systems, your social civic systems, all your social systems, all the systems and traditions that you have in a community is fermented through religion, a realization that there's something greater than yourself, and that something is the Almighty Creator in whatever language or whatever name that you may call God. So we have our own story. It varies from one African community to another, but the premise is the same. And that premise is trying to explain our humble beginnings, how we got here, what our responsibilities are today, and where we're heading tomorrow.
Mm. But many of the churches that permeate Africa right now, I think they do understand, particularly the Pentecostal churches, they do understand that
Mm.
the concept of cosmology does tie the people together.
Mhm.
That's really what makes them, work together.
Yeah,
But for you to get control of the people, you have to disband that. You have to make it vagrant.
absolutely.
You have to remove the hold. And that is why, even though you see people who have joined different religions, but when
Mhm.
push comes to shove, they still go back to their cultural way of doing things, right?
Yeah,
Because of
yeah.
the force of that. So why do you think, I mean, does that explain why the cosmology of African communities continue to persist even when foreign religions come into play?
Well, what we have to understand is we had a system of worship. Our cosmogony and cosmologies existed before the Europeans showed up on our shores with the Bible and the Quran. Uh, it is difficult to really get rid of that because there are people in African communities that hold on to their culture, hold on to their history, and have continued to fight this foreign brain cleansing that is going on in African communities all over the world, right? Take what is theirs, supplant it with yours, then you have control of them. But they will never wipe Africa's history away. They may minimize, how the information about our contributions to, human behavior, minimize how much we contributed, to humanity and its history. But you can't totally wipe it away. I mean, physically speaking, we were enslaved, right? Africans were never slaves. We were enslaved. We were brought to the Americas, millions of Africans.
Mm-hmm.
Arabs sold and enslaved over 40 million Africans. We
Yes.
have been going through this for
For
hundreds
the
and hundreds
longest.
of years,
Nothing
and
new.
yet we still are here. There are still over 1 billion people on the continent of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not including the, Africans that live outside of
Mm-hmm.
the homeland.
Mm-hmm.
We're still here. Trying
Mm-hmm.
to get rid of African culture and African traditions is like trying to get rid of Africans, period. It's not going to happen. You may minimize our influence, religiously speaking, right? Because of slavery and colonization, and through the generations have really wiped out, any knowledge of what our contributions to civilized behavior were. But there are people in the back end of things that continue, like you and I, to promote African culture and to tell our story, right? And if we can touch one generation, they continue the fight for relevance. That's really our duty and our responsibility. And as long as there are people like you and I and our listeners that are interested in the knowledge that they gain from listening to our shows, there's hope.
Yeah, and what is imperative that people understand about cosmology is that is your worldview. This
Yes.
is how you relate to your world. And sometimes, and of course, your ancestors contrived your worldview because of what they observed, what they know that you're going to be observing as you move along. So you really cannot run away from the worldview of your ancestors. All right,
No.
because it impacts how we relate to one another, how we relate to even nature, what we eat, all of that.
Yes.
When you have the concept of this is what Chineke gave us, and this is what we're supposed to do with it. That is our worldview. In other words, and our cosmology also teaches us not only to respect nature, but to see life in nature so that you don't hurt anything that lives, that grows, that has life. You don't have to talk. I think it's because of our relationship with nature. We don't hurt nature. In African culture, you find if you want to cut a tree, you're not going to cut a tree just because you want to cut a tree. So in some ways, Africans have a tendency to ask for forgiveness when they cut a tree,
Yeah.
or if they're going to kill an animal, they will ask for forgiveness for doing that, and actually do it based on the fact that that animal, according to their understanding, is there for their nourishment, not for gain. So, if you have a worldview that says to respect nature, respect other living things, you have a better relationship with your fellow man. But when we have diverted our or moved away is the word I'm looking for. When we've moved away from that concept, now it's nothing to kill. People go hunting just for the purpose of hunting. They kill animals, they hang it in their houses, right? Am I right?
Yeah.
They cut down logs.
The big game hunter.
Big game hunting because of the worldview,
That they have.
yeah. But see, we are moving away from ours. If you look at the Akan, you look at well, you talk about the Igbo concept of cosmology, how life began. For at least for us in Chiism, Gordianism, we have our own concept about how life began, and it impacts how we relate to one another. Talk about that.
Yeah, the willingness of a people to come together, can be said to depend largely on their education, which can be defined as a deliberate system of cultural promotion or cause of instigation by which a person fits squarely into a society to which he or she belongs as a responsible, citizen. In ancient times, even before schools, formal education existed. The purpose of education was to train members of the community in fundamental skills, right? Approved skills, habits, customs, group traditions, and religion peculiar to a specific community. Some of the skills that you gain, like skills of defense from perceived enemies, skills of farming, shelter, which is architecture. When I talk about shelter, I'm talking about architecture, were included in the education of the youth, through their parents, right? Before the institution of formal education, came into play. Folklore, proverbs, folk songs, and oral traditions were powerful vehicles by which parents of ancient times conveyed and instilled education in their children, right? Now, in a broad sense, everything that is acquired in life, habits, knowledge, skills, interests, your attitude, right? Personality, language, not just attending school, but the totality of your human experience is what education is all about, right? In other words, education actually concerns itself with all the capabilities and habits acquired by any member of society, right? It is simply cultural promotion within a community of human beings. Now, every every human community in this world has one burden on the spiritual level. Scientifically, humans back then were not that advanced to start to talk about the Big Bang and what have you, right? But our biggest burden was to explain, how did we get here? How did we get here? You mentioned earlier about the environment. What is responsible for these life sustaining forces?
Yes.
The air that I breathe,
Yes.
which I was not responsible for. The meat that I eat, which I didn't create. The hills, the valleys, the sky above, the water that I drink, the fish
Yes.
in the water, all these life sustaining forces. What is responsible for these life sustaining forces that keep me alive as a human being? That was the first burden and the first questions that the first man and the first woman were concerned with. And by being concerned with that or these questions, religion became automatic in them. Now, the etymology, the actual true meaning of religion, is a realization that as a human being, you are not responsible for the life sustaining forces that keep you alive. You ascribe it to a being higher than yourself. And that being to you becomes the Almighty Creator. In English, it's God. In Chisholm, in Igbo land, is Chuku or Chineke. In Yoruba, it's Olodumare. The Hebrews call the Creator Yahweh, right? The Arabs call it Allah, God of many languages. So when you realize there's something greater than yourself, that something becomes the Almighty Creator. That realization, or with that realization, religion becomes automatic in you, because the meaning of religion simply is a duty that a person feels compelled to perform in reverence to something greater than oneself, and that something is the Almighty Creator.
Is that what led to the compartmentalization of
That is exactly
you've got God, Chineke, and
the
then you
Godhead.
have the spirits?
Then you have
Talk
the
about that.
spirits.
Talk about
You
that.
go from Fijoko to Imomiri to
Kuroche,
Ekuroche,
Kuroche, Allah,
Kamalo, all that stuff.
ancestors. Yeah.
The ancestors that occupy the bottom level of it, because the ancestors are your blueprint. They tell you where you've been, where you are today, and then you make decision based on that footprint to where it is that you're going to, where you're going to be going to. Now, in our cosmogony, the first man and the first woman that was created were Ifenta and Ada, right? Just like in Christianism, you have Adam and Eve. Adam, the first man, Eve, the first woman. In Igbo cosmogony, at least in the Igbo area of where I come from, or Hofia Breba Nkporo area, Eventa, right, is the first man, and Adam is the first woman. In the beginning, Chineke, according to our cosmogony, occupied the heavens, Igwe, and the earth, Owa. And all living things in the land, on the land, waters, all that stuff were one. Chineke's spirit was in everything. Chineke created the first man and named the first man Ifenta. Chineke to us is known as light, Chi, God of light, the big one. Ifenta is the junior light, right? Ifenta's name means light, the small or junior light, a representation of Chineke. Humanity, where we come from, is called Ndife, meaning children of the light, where Chineke, the supreme light of the universe. God is Chineke, is known as the supreme light of the universe. Then Chineke created the first woman. She was beautiful, and it was in the image of the spirit of Chineke. And Chineke said, Nka bu Adam, Oma bu Adam. That is why in Igbo culture, where we come from, the first daughter in every family is called Ada. So for those that don't know where the name Adam came from, it came from the fact that Chineke's first daughter was named Adam.
That's
Now
right,
in
my
Hebrew
daughter.
language, yeah, in Hebrew language, they say Adam, which
Mhm.
is actually a guy. It's a man. But in
Mhm.
Igbo culture, Adam, Ada apostrophe M, Adam
Mhm.
was the first woman. So Ifenta and Adam were the children or are the children of light. Now keep in mind, right? Now we could have arguments of who was created first, the woman or created the man first. We could have that argument. But what I can tell you is this: the woman was not created from Adam's rib. Her
Yes.
existence was not dependent on Ifenta or Adam in Hebrew cosmogony,
Mhm.
right? It was an individual creation because Chineke understood that for procreation's reasons,
Mhm.
to be able to procreate,
Mhm.
the woman was just as important as the man. You can't do it on your own. So chi na eke, the masculine and feminine essence of the creator,
Mhm.
is also explained or emphasized in our cosmogony.
Mhm.
Now remember, this is also mythology.
Mhm.
And that's what we have to understand, that the story of creation is not based on any testable fact, right? It's not a test
Mhm.
tube. You
Mhm.
don't go in the lab and pour the man in here and pour the woman in here and they shake him all around and do
Yeah.
whatever, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The burden that the African had in explaining their origins and how they came about, to explain the life sustaining forces that keep them alive,
Mhm.
is the same burden that people of all cultures
That's right.
faced. So it's not an independent, right?
Mhm.
How do you? It's not an independent. The word I'm looking for just went away, but it's not something that just happened to Africans. All other cultures, right?
But
Have.
yeah, yeah. The, great point. And this is where we are lacking understanding that there is nothing unique about anyone else's.
Exactly.
You have your own. Seek your own and find out. It explains to you who you are. And what is damaging, I think, when we talk about body image, when we talk about culture, festivals, when we talk about everything we do,
Mhm.
whether you know it or not, as you emulate your family members, those who probably know more than you do, all the whole concept of who the creator is, how he came to be, is all packaged, and you are practicing it without knowing it. What happens is once you leave that and you start practicing something else, you lose a little bit of yourself. You see, if you have self-confidence, if you're told a story and that story is designed to build your confidence, and you abandon that and you adopt something different, then it minimizes your self-confidence. You become quite easily gullible. I was watching, Divya, I was watching a video. It was quite disturbing to me how these, and I'm not here trying to be prejudiced or anything, but I'm just trying to emphasize what happens when you abandon who you are in favor of something else. It showed a Chinese businessman
Mm.
had lined up African workers while he sat here. He couldn't sit next to them. They were all cowering around him.
Mm.
Igbo, can we talk about that? Igbo. I mean, how do you see a man who came into your homeland as more important than you are, that you cower in his presence? If you see how these people were acting in the presence of this man, I had to
Well,
turn off the television because the point I'm trying to make is when you see yourself as less than, right? You
yeah,
become vulnerable. You can be taken advantage of. But when you have pride, and this is why the Chinese, the Indians, all of them using their own cosmology, using their own interpretation of what life is about and how it came to be, they apply that in their relationship with the world, right? And they have
absolutely.
pride in who they are. But when you think or you've been convinced that your way of thinking is bad or wrong
Mm.
or less than, it is not just the philosophy that is diminished. You are diminished. Your
I mean,
children are diminished.
yeah.
This is why I want you to talk about the importance. If you
Hmm.
don't know, then you need to find out. If you see how your children are acting in front, okay, of other children of other races, if yours are intimidated, you must ask, why are they intimidated? Why do they feel less than? They are listening to someone else's story, not their story.
Absolutely.
Please talk about that.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up because we have to look at things in the context of taking what is yours, supplanting it with something that doesn't belong to you.
Mm-hmm.
You take into account the centuries of this mind war,
Mm-hmm.
which was not voluntary on our path,
Yeah.
right? It wasn't. We were beat down.
Mm-hmm.
We went from Kunta Kinte to
Mm-hmm.
Toby,
Yes.
right? We changed.
Uh,
We went from Ngozi to Blessing. You understand? And now you got Africans running around here with names like Monday,
Tuesday,
Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and damn it,
Friday.
Friday too. You understand? So you're looking at the
I
people
haven't
that
heard
exist.
Saturday yet, but it's coming.
Well, that's a tongue twister. I mean, if you come out tomorrow and tell somebody my name is Saturday, that's it. I'm done. I give up.
It's coming.
They've now totally won. But fortunately, there's still Udemi's ways alive, right?
Yeah.
And the old ones are still there. The
Yes.
Ngozis are still there,
Yeah.
and the Obiajulos are still there. So that gives me hope. But you have to understand the culture of a nation or race is defined as the customs, information, and skills, right?
Mhm.
Domestic public life, the war and peace, religion, art, science, right? And it's transmitted through past experiences.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
understand what I'm saying? And it
Yes.
is this transmission through past experiences that determines what your anchor is. In the beginning, I talked about the fact that when you talk about cosmology, you're talking about dual relationship, metaphysical dualism under the ontological structure of being. What do I mean by ontological structure? I'm talking about the compartmentalization of life sustaining forces. It exists in all religions, not necessarily in the same order or not necessarily looked upon the same way. But when you talk about the creator, when you talk about God, God does not exist in a vacuum. God is just not there. And then that's it. God exists with life sustaining forces or exists in some hierarchy. For example, take Christianity. There's a Godhead, then there's a Holy Spirit, there's the Son, right? All three are compartmentalized to give you God in totality. So Africans are not the only people that have this ontological structure of being. It exists in other cultures. Now, talking about the Chinese man and all that, you're dealing with people that, number one, lack that education, right? Because whatever history that they had, whatever level of contributions that they had made to civilized behavior was systematically by the European and Arab invaders wiped out. Now, you've heard me so many times talk about the sin, right? Or the misunderstanding of cross-cultural pollination and how you apply cross-cultural pollination to the well-being of the community, right? It's not everything in human culture for a specific community that is healthy, given the period of time that such exercises exist. There's some things that need to be jettisoned, right?
Yeah.
Things that you believed in 1,000 years ago because you didn't have any scientific explanation for it, you find that today it's irrelevant because you don't have an explanation for
That's
it.
right.
So you
That's
jettison
right.
those things,
That's right.
right? But they're called spiritual beliefs that cannot be compromised, no matter how scientifically developed they are. I'll give you an example. Thou shalt not lie.
That's right.
It exists in all religion. Science can't explain that. Science cannot make lying relevant. Science can make lying right. The only thing that can make lying acceptable at a given period of time is the situation that precipitated you lying in the first place. So you can understand that thou shalt not lie is not an unbreakable commandment, and it exists in all religion. It's not a Christian or Jewish thing. There's no culture in the world that says thou shalt lie. Okay? Thou shalt not kill.
Yeah.
Exists in all cultures, but people will kill based on the situation. You will kill. But one of the commandments that I find totally unacceptable and unbreakable in all cultures, and there's a price and no justification for it, is that thou shalt not covet somebody else's wife. That's an unforgivable sin. I don't know any culture that says, oh, it's okay for you to mess with somebody's wife. There's no situation. If you don't like your relationship, get out of it. Divorce. But a man's wife, a woman's husband is a woman's husband, a woman's wife. And that's it. No, I don't know any culture that compromises that at all. The one last point I want to make is this, in terms of how we behave and how we think and why we are where we are today, behaving like people that don't have any sense of self. What has happened to the Black African can be explained or emphasized, in this way. If you live in Greenland or the North Pole and you're an Eskimo and somebody asks you, what is evidence in your eyes that God, Chineke, exists? You're probably going to talk about the snow. You're going to talk about the tuna. You're going to talk about the polar bear, the walrus. You're going to talk about all those life-sustaining forces that exist in Greenland or the North Pole. That is your evidence that a God exists, because you're not responsible for those life-sustaining forces in your environment. Now, if you go to the Amazon jungle in South America and ask an Inca or an Aztec, what is the evidence of the creator in your world? He's going to point to the jaguar, to the anaconda, to the jungle, to the rivers, to the crocodilia. He's going to talk about all the life-sustaining forces in his environment that he's not responsible for that sustain him or her. What has happened to the African is that the Eskimo came down from the North Pole, from Greenland to the Amazon jungle, and then told the Amazonian that he should believe in the polar bear, that he should believe in the snow, that he should believe in the walrus, that he should believe in life-sustaining forces that do not exist in his environment in terms of the food that he eats. They breathe the same air. That is universal. There's no argument. Air in the Amazon is air up in the North Pole. There's no fight over that.
Mm-hmm.
But the Eskimo comes to the Amazonian and tells the Amazonian that the evidence of God around you is snow when the temperature is 120 degrees in the jungle. This is what has happened to the African. We listen to that. And
yes.
now we believe that in Mboro, in Abreba or nature, there's Snow White over there.
Mm-hmm. Part of the cosmology, which is all really based on the need, at least our explanation, the need to harmonize, the harmonization of the spirit world, the spiritual leader, spiritual God, whatever you want to call Ludumari in Yoruba, like you said, Tamona, Jinyami, Katonda, Nyam. Why do we have those different names, right? It's because before anybody came to us, we already had that understanding that we have a connection to, and they're described based on what we believe they do for us.
Yeah,
okay?
Absolutely.
So we believe, like you said, you want to find out what was responsible for what we have around us, not what's around someone else's. We say, if you're not chop off, what does that mean? What you seek, so shall you find. Well, you're not going to find polar bear in Africa. You're not going to find that. So you're not seeking anything you can find by looking for polar bear. So if somebody comes there and tells you about something perhaps that originates, something that happens in where they came from, or something that exists where they came from, and then you abandon something that's pragmatic, something that you see, something that you feel, something that you touch, okay, or something that was contrived in your cultural folklore, that you should abandon that. And now you start following something that has nothing to bear with your reality, has nothing to do with your reality. That creates so much confusion. I have seen our people, some of our conversations, sometimes it's disturbing for some people to hear, but then again, it's reality. When you see there was a woman that was burned alive by members of the community. But do you know why? Because as we're talking about harmonizing with nature, she was growing medicinal plants that she was able to use to help others. They said it was witchcraft. They didn't understand what she's trying to say, that there are things in nature that will cure us, that you don't find in a bottle. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to order from outside.
Hold that thought for a second. You're going to continue to make a point. Just hold that thought. Reason I say hold that thought is this. If somebody from Europe was to come down and tell them the same thing that the lady that they burned told them about the plants and all that, they will accept it.
But it's being accepted already. What is going on is we have the Chinese have gotten very creative, right?
Yeah.
They are going to this. I took my daughter to the village, and I introduced her to what is it? There's a plant called I can't think of the name of this plant. It was wild. It was growing everywhere, right? And I showed her how you take a little bit of that, and if you have a sore, it will stop the bleeding automatically. Okay. Now that's something in our environment. Well, the Chinese are coming in and taking those things that we think it's it's just it's nothing. Well, they're they are using it, putting them in bottles. Now we're buying it, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas if we can take the time to harmonize with nature, harmonize with the spirit, as you indicated earlier, Chineke said to Ifenta and Adam, everything that you find in this world
It's for
is
your
there
own
for
good.
your own good. It's for
Yeah.
your good. In other words, there's nothing that you want that doesn't already exist or that you cannot have. You know,
Yeah.
everything that's been put in here is for your own good. There's nothing that exists anywhere else that doesn't exist here to suit what your needs are. Now, the people in the United States and in cold climes, right? They wear coats, right? Because it's
Yeah.
cold. Okay, you don't have to feel that you must wear a coat too in the hot sun. You don't need
No,
that. You see,
it's like
so when I say this, there's nothing someone else has that you cannot have. Well, that's something they have you don't need. You see what I'm saying?
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Chineke said to Ifenta and Ada, and this is a point that is very important. It's a point that needs to be made, right? Because people think that everything is all pre-packaged for humanity. No, it's not. Chineke said to Ada, everything that I've created around you is for your good.
Good. That's right.
From trial and error,
Yes.
you will be able to determine those things that are good for you to help perpetuate your existence on
That's right.
earth.
That's right.
I will be in you always.
Yes.
Gigentenala, Gano, Ikitiokpa, Ndanda.
That's right.
I'll be with you always. If you listen closely with your ear to the ground, you will hear the footsteps of ants. That is your conscience. That is the transmission between the physical being and the spiritual being. Without the spiritual being to guide your behavior, the physical being will destroy itself because there's nothing to guide your behavior. They don't exist in a vacuum. Good does not exist in a vacuum without evil, and vice versa. There has to be evil for you to understand what good is. There has to be good for you to understand what evil is.
Evil is.
There's an opposite to human existence. The heavens, Elu, Igwe, and the earth, Owa, name which you bear as a child of God, right?
Yes.
Now, to not get into all the big details of the conversations that God had with human beings and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. You know, let's not make up all, we'll tell all the stories, the fairy tales, whatever you call it, because every culture tells theirs. They just get down to the nitty gritty of how we extol the presence of Chineke in our lives and the role that Chineke plays in our existence as human beings. Now, this may or may not shock a lot of people, but for those people that came into Africa and then told us that we knew nothing about God and that we must see God from their own prism. Now, check this out. In our naming conventions, right, we uphold and acknowledge the existence and the importance of Chineke, God, in our lives. So we name the generations, or Ifenta and Ada named the generations after them in the glory of the Almighty God. So let me give you, some examples of names. Ada, first daughter, gender, female. Amarachi, grace of God or grace of Chineke, female. Ane, Mother Earth, a life-sustaining force, female. Chidi, an acknowledgement that God exists. God is a male name. Chidimma, God is good. Chineke bụ ezi ife, it's a female. Chidozie, God will keep me. It's a male name. Chibuka, God Almighty. Chimezie, God will solve problems. So on and so forth. Kamalo, divinity of God. Kelechi, give thanks to God. Ngozeka or Ngozi, God's blessing is the greatest.
Mm.
So you could see that in our names, there's so many, I'm not going to list them all out, but in the names that are traditionally relevant to us in Igbo land, you could see the acknowledgement of divinity for the Almighty Chineke, right?
And no, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
And that you're expected to act accordingly.
yes.
If if the creator is strong, you can't be weak. Chibondo.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be, I mean, every name that we give and that we ascribe to the greatness or whatever virtue that we ascribe to Chineke and we give it to our child, we're expecting the child to act accordingly. I want to read something here from Obi Onyoha. Relativity to culture, ethnography on African societies' erroneous in interpretations of African worldview. Example, interpreting reticence of an African child in the presence of an adult as stupid. That's right. You know, when a child doesn't speak up, you know, they're saying, you know, whereas in our culture, they're really supposed to be respectful of an elder. And they're not supposed to, you know, run their mouth in the, you know, where they're elders. You know, that's what I'm saying. So I like that comment. What do you think?
No, it's true. I mean, in the village in Umboro there, unless somebody asks you a question, if you're a child, you're just there. You don't say anything.
Yeah.
Right?
It doesn't mean you're stupid. You're just giving reverence to your elders.
It's reverence to your elders. It acknowledges the hierarchy of being, right? The elders. When the elders are talking, young men don't even say a word.
Yeah.
And they will do what the elders command to be done. It's a hierarchy.
Listen, you're learning. When you're quiet, you learn. When you're running your mouth, you miss important information. You know, so
because at some point you will become an elder.
That's right.
You will become an adult, and you're going to have the same expectations that the adults in your life have of you, right? This is how people fit squarely into their communities. This is how responsibilities are allocated. You have to listen. I remember when you're a child that doesn't listen or whatever the situation may be. I've experienced this from my own father when he's admonishing me for not paying attention. If
you don't listen, you're gonna listen one way or the other.
One way or the other, and usually you're going to be listening from a point of, from a place where coming back from not listening becomes almost impossible.
Yeah.
So you have to pay attention. But the larger point here is simply this: we were before they came to our shores. There is absolutely nothing that was introduced to the African religiously
that we didn't know
already have and abided by and ran our societies in a cohesive and productive, in a cohesive way with productive results. We had our own medical system. We had our own military system. We had our own agricultural system. We had our own spiritual system. We had our own civic system. We had everything that a community or society needed, right, to be able to function cohesively. So what happens is they came in through violence, destroyed as much of what we had as possible, supplanted it with theirs, and then instituted institutions, educational institutions, and laws that were foreign to us in the hope or in an attempt to exercise any fundamental cultural virtue that we had as a society.
Well, we say that in Igbo we say Okpa Ukandodo.
Oh yeah, you tell somebody else a story.
We know how to talk about other people's history. We can
Yeah.
regurgitate it like it was no yesterday. But when it comes to our own, we switch off. It's
Yeah.
almost like all these conspiracy theories go around. When you get it injected with the COVID vaccine, there's something in there, some chip or whatever, all that nonsense. But
Mm-hmm.
it almost seems like something was embedded in our mind, some chip that makes us switch off everything African.
I mean,
Once you talk about African stuff, we switch off. If I
because
was talking about, and I think you and I had that conversation, if we're talking about something, all right, that has nothing to do with us, right?
yeah,
You get amen, 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 amen.
and that's
But when
something
you're talking about something about us, that switch
nobody
goes
even
on.
cares.
And so, no. The truth of the matter is that you understand the switch is off. And if somebody is not showing any interest, oh Lord, they just turned off his switch. There is a switch, a spiritual switch, a mental switch that has been embedded in our minds, right? We've been conditioned to turn away from knowing what's important for what's good for us. But we are quick to turn it on, to embrace. I find it very fascinating. If you go to all the African universities, right?
Mm.
All of them teach Eurocentrism.
Every
All of them.
single one.
I don't
There's no,
care which one. They can
yeah.
give it. They can call it whatever. It could be in Ghana. It could be in Togo. It could be wherever. Very few of them teach African stuff. Very few. You see. So that switch, when the religions came, they implanted in our minds that switch. So when it comes
Mhm.
to anything that has to do with our well-being, our culture, it's switched up.
Think about this, Ogile. Think about this. Most cultures in the world, and I mean dominant cultures, right?
Mm, mm,
Because there are thousands of them
uh,
all over the world. I mean, all kinds
yeah.
of cultures. I mean, within Igbo land, you even have different cultures with the same premise, but different way of practicing the same thing, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But every dominant culture, and you could go do this research, information is out there on the
Yeah.
internet.
Yeah.
Every dominant culture has at least one institution of higher learning dedicated
To
to
them.
that particular cultural philosophy,
That's right.
except for Africa.
That's right.
We don't have any university dedicated to Africans the world over. Our so-called
Strictly for African.
HBCUs, in America, black
Mm,
universities,
mm.
they don't talk nothing about
But,
Africa.
well, have you seen? Have you seen? Oh, and I want
They
to
don't even
read
talk
some.
about Africa itself. That just
No, Nosferatu says people travel to study with from us, not the other way around. Yes, people did come to. Well, initially people came to study from us, right?
yeah.
And now we go to study from them. And when we study from them, we abandon our own. That's the tragedy of the thing. Um,
Here's on the thing that people probably don't know, and because sometimes history gets distorted,
yes.
right? The relationship of the black man and woman from Europe was not always contentious.
No.
It was not always. There's a book that Ahai wrote, and you know of this book, While
Mm.
the Devil Was Painted Black.
Black. Yeah.
A few thousand years ago, black folks ruled Europe.
Yes.
A while back, the Moors, the black Moors, influenced Europe education, so on and
That's
so
right.
forth.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of slavery is just something that happened within the last 1,000 years, right?
Uh-huh.
Ghana used to trade with Europe, and Europeans used to come to Ghana to trade. Carthage,
Mm.
some of the warriors in Carthage, Egyptians, the Nubians of Egypt, these were black people that influenced the world. Shakespeare had a writer, a woman. So when you're reading this Macbeth and all that stuff, don't sit
Mm.
around there thinking that Shakespeare just sat down and wrote it.
Mm.
He was influenced. The main writer was a woman. It's sort of like
Mm.
the Black American or the enslaved African that found the cure for, I think it was smallpox or something like that. And then they took it from him and then decided to present this scientific and medical, finding as if it was the white man that came up with it. Right here in the United States, the first heart surgery was by a black man, even though he wasn't standing, sitting in the or standing in the operating room. He was a black guy who was telling the doctor what the heck to do at John Hopkins University. They just now finally put his picture up there as one of the medical greats.
You said something earlier that Obionyoha Adonha wants you to explain.
Yeah, we had talked. We actually explained this.
That, go ahead.
We actually explained it in the beginning, right?
Okay.
When somebody's saying something, you don't listen. When you finally say to yourself, had I known, which is always the last thing you say before the head comes off. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's the entire
Pay attention. Pay attention.
You ain't listening. The ear that doesn't listen. When that ear finally listened, your head will be in a sack. And it means that you're gonna, if you don't listen, you're gonna find yourself in a position where there's no comeback from your lack of listening.
Vulnerable. You become vulnerable, and that's what's happening.
And there's no comeback from it.
I have to give African Americans big time credit. I mean, power up. That's what they've done. They have proven to everybody in this country that we have the power to make a change. We have the power to change things. All we have to do is come together, understand that we are very capable of changing our lives and changing our environment. And it's the same thing that continental Africans need to begin to practice. And that is that understanding that we are good enough because, as we said earlier, it is the harmonizing, right, of the Creator, our environment, and our people. We need to understand that everything that has come to us thus far, they didn't come for our own good. They came to take from us, all right? The world is what they say, it's a global world. We open our arms to individuals who will come in. But now we need to be a little bit more skeptical. Why are you here? Is your presence here to take from me or to add to my well-being? All right? We cannot willy, right? Keep allowing people abandoning things that held us together. And we say, abakotoma, as opposed to you see what I'm saying? When we work together, we can do more. We can fight off evil. We can fight off any enemy if we stop being so gullible and abandoning your things, abandoning your stories, abandoning your cosmology, how you came to be. That is a sure bet that you will be open to anything that comes your way. Anything. That's why we're where we are today.
It is.
Now, I just want to add this thing before you close. Let's understand about Africans. Africans are the most intelligent, and I'm not just saying it because I'm African. Of course, I'm proud to be African, but I'm here to say to you, anywhere you go in this world,
academic intelligence,
creativity, ingenuity, we've got it down pat. All right, we've got it. All that you can't take from us. But what I don't understand is how we continue to be naive in thinking that people who are coming to us are there for our own good when obviously the continent is not doing very well for the people. I mean, it's doing well for those who are coming in. When Americans come, they come with their dollars, right? Well, they do well there. The Chinese, they have the money, they come, they do well. But the people there are not doing very well. You know, the indigents are not doing very well. Some people don't like me to say indigents, but well, it's relative here. You know, our people are not doing as well as they can be doing. And that is because of this whole concept of their thing is better than ours. We learn. And then let me say one more thing, Yudi. We are good at learning their things and we excel. We excel when we learn their things. But we don't excel when we focus on our things, on our own knowledge. Do you understand what I'm saying? We
Yeah.
are excellent. I mean, medicine, you name it, we take over. We understand that. But then we don't learn our own things so that we can excel in the knowledge of self, the knowledge of our own people, so that our children will be knowledgeable about who they are, can excel in things that pertain to them. But we excel in things that other people bring to us, other people teach us. Okay? So
Tragic.
that is, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it's you know, another misunderstanding of cross-cultural pollination. Pick what's theirs, jettison what's yours, which is
Yes.
wrong. You're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to take what you can from other people,
Yeah.
add to what you have, and those things that are not relevant to you anymore, you
Yes.
get rid of it
Yeah.
because culture is dynamic. Life is about change, right?
Mm-hmm.
A
Mm-hmm.
thousand years ago it doesn't look like today.
Yeah.
And then coming to the early point that you made, I summarize that as, you know, what do we say? Almost a book, right? We're
Say it
successful
again.
outside.
Say it again.
Oma osobuku, ne agbari ọtọ.
Mm-hmm.
You're all dressed up in your nice gabs, or you're looking good, but your mother's naked in the village.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay for us to be successful outside of Africa.
Yes.
In Europe, we have Nigerian mayors over there,
Yes.
right? Over here in
Mayors. Yes.
America, yeah, we know we boast so many doctors, engineers,
Mm.
what have you. We're successful outside. We do all that stuff, but in the homeland, you cannot boast of those kinds of successes or mental state of being. Your
Mm.
mind
The
is
mind
somewhere
is out
else,
of focus.
right? The
Mm-hmm.
problem in Africa, first of all, let me explain something about, because we talk about education and all of that, and it is key to everything.
Mm.
Because without education, you can't know your past, let alone, you know where you're going, right?
Mm.
You use evidence
Yeah.
to be able to strategically plan for the future,
Mm.
right? You need
Yes.
data from the past. You collect data, you analyze it,
That's right.
you plan for a future. The willingness of a people to come together can be said to depend largely on their education. You have to be educated for you to be willing to come together as Africans, but we are fractured all over the world. The African American sees himself different from the African in the homeland. The Jamaican sees himself different from the Haitian.
Mm.
So on and so forth. All the different disenfranchised African communities globally don't see themselves as one. Yet we all went through the same persecution by the
Yes.
slave master and the colonizer.
Mm. Mm.
People talk about lynching in the United States. How many people talk about what King Leopold of Belgium did to Black Africans in Congo? The amputation of over 2 million Africans
Mm.
and the murder of over 10 million Africans in just a short period of time. Who talks about that? Should the African American talk about it? Or should the Africans talk
The
about that
Africans should talk about it.
in their educational system?
Mm.
When you teach African history, do you
Yes.
teach that? I didn't know anything about Belgium and Congo and what Leopold did when I was
Mm.
going to high school in
Mm.
Nigeria until I
Yes.
came here. I went to college in the United States. And even when I went to college, I didn't get that until I became
Mm.
an adult. Doing my own
Mm.
research, that's when I came about that information. Who talks about that? Education can be defined as a deliberate system of cultural promotion or course of instigation by which a person is forced to fit squarely into the society. You know your place. You know
Mm.
what you're supposed to do as a responsible citizen. And it is through education that that can happen. We have leadership in Africa without courage. And that's
Yes,
what we really need in Africa.
that's right.
We have to be courageous.
Well, colonization, as Obi has
Yeah,
indicated here, colonization of the mind, the sense of inferiority is so deeply embedded in our
in
psyche.
our
It's
psyche.
very difficult to, to
But the only
unplug it. It's
deal with it.
difficult. It's
Yeah.
difficult. But you know what, time is against us now. Um, this is a 1 hour show. I'm sure
Oh
that
yeah.
we could have continued even further.
Yeah.
But in closing, I just want to remind all of us, we're not African in name only. We cannot be African in name only. Even that word African was given to us. So we're going to have to figure how to get
New
away
name
from that
for
name,
it. Yeah.
Africanus. That's what it is. But
Skip it.
with our who we are is tied to our understanding. You know, each and every day we're asked to be just a little bit wiser and smarter in our relationship with our world. The way to do it is to have faith in who we are, to look up who we are if we don't know, and practice those things that are critical for us to practice to keep us together, to keep us from becoming vulnerable to the rest of the world. I thank all of you for joining us today. Yudi, you did a marvelous job as always. I'd like to
Thank
thank
you.
all of you who joined us. Obi Onyoha, thank you, Nurse Faratu, Matthew Lewis, Ukuna Charles. Let's see, Ezinne Moore, youngest. Let's see, so somebody else I saw. There were several individuals that joined us today. Thank you very much, and I do hope that you will join us for the next episode of Chism Live. Until we see you again, please be safe wherever you may be or wherever you go. Thank you.
Yeah, guys, here.
Yeah, guys, yeah. Good day. Get Messiano.
Yeah.